Well, welcome to another episode of In the Room with Adam. There's nobody in the room, really. It's the couple people that live at my house that are here. Everyone else is on via Zoom. Can you guys all just wave and say hey, all of our online audience? This is a handful of our leaders, some of our staff members, and we just thought we'd love for you guys to get a chance to just eavesdrop on a leadership lesson, a devotional, something that we would do as a staff. I don't know how much of this you guys can actually see, but I just decided not to clean up today. So there's like my coffee table is full of Legos. Like I'm in bad need of a haircut. I got this sprig coming up over here. I actually had somebody comment recently on one of the videos of like, man, Pastor Adam, things are getting rough. You're starting to wear the same thing every day. And I was like, oh, no, I've been wearing the same thing every day since way before quarantine. But when Legos start just like being everywhere as the blanket carpet of my life, you know I've been in quarantine for a super long time. So many spaceships have been made in this house. But today I want to talk about what it means to be a good neighbor. And I want to just start by reading you something that Jesus is famous for having said, where he's asked, what is the point of life? Or what is the meaning of life? And essentially he responds in this way. I'm going to read you the version that's found in Mark chapter 12, verse 30 and 31, where he says, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength, all of the things, right? And the second one is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. And really what Jesus is doing here, when he's asked about what the point of his existence is, he essentially says, you want to channel everything that you are and everything you have into loving God and to loving other people. And this is not necessarily an original idea to him. In fact, he's taking two ideas from the Old Testament, from Deuteronomy chapter 6 and Leviticus chapter 19, and he's mashing them up together and connecting them and saying these two things together really are the core of what it is to live a full life. And what I think is really interesting, and even if you go all the way back to the Old Testament, is that this wasn't just theoretical, it was enormously practical. There's all these details that maybe don't make a lot of sense to us today, all these rules and regulations about leaving certain crops at the edge of your field so that your neighbor can get access and make sure that they have enough, not just you have enough. And all these things about being generous, or if people ask you for things, what the obligation is to say yes and offer what you have. And we read through some of these rules and we're like, it's crazy to make a rule about that. And it's because to just say like love other people just feels so big and generic that we need some sort of guidelines to grab a hold of. And because especially in our culture, and it was true even then, we love everything, right? The word starts to lose its meaning. And so we need some sort of handles in terms of what does that mean? Paul talks about this topic in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and he says a whole bunch of things that love is. But one that really stands out to me when it talks about being a neighbor is this idea of love is kind, right? The very first part of that verse that you've heard at every wedding you've ever been to, right? Love is patient, love is kind. And kindness isn't niceness, it's helpfulness. And another way to think about it is to be kind is to be considerate. And that's really what it is to be a good neighbor, to be considerate. What essentially this is telling us is that in order to love our neighbor, we need to love them the way they need to be loved, not in the way we want to be loved. And I think that's a difficult idea to wrap our brain around, right? Other people are not exactly like you. Has anybody noticed this about your life and the people that maybe you're quarantined with? That they don't want and need the same things as you, right? The things that I need are reasonable. The things that you need are absurd and ridiculous. Anybody ever thought that, right? It's just like, and so then we think like, you shouldn't need that. Why? Because I don't need that. You should only need the things that I need. You should only want the things that I want. And that's where this really becomes stretching. They shouldn't need that much alone time because I don't need that much alone time, right? Or maybe the inverse. They should not need to talk this much. Why? Because I don't need to talk this much, okay? I'm not specifically calling out Ezekiel, but like, I could be, okay? Like they shouldn't be feeling this emotional because I'm not feeling this emotional right now. So It's unfair. You should be a carbon copy of me or else you're crazy, right? And that is unloving. To be a good neighbor, to be somebody who loves others with a great deal of kindness or consideration, is to think about and attempt to see the world and process the world through their eyes, and attempt to separate ourselves just from what we want to do because it's what we would want, and actually engage in connecting them to what they need. And I want to give you, in the spirit of the Levitical law, right, just some guidelines, some guardrails, because sometimes I think it feels so open and so big, where it's like, I want to love other people in the same way that I love God, in the same way that God loves me. What does that look like? And so let me give you some thoughts for us to kind of build off of as we're trying to figure out how to apply this in our lives. And the first thing I want to encourage you to do is reach out. You ever think about how someone's doing and you're like, man, I should call them? Oh, well. And you just don't do it. Or this happens to me all the time, where I'll think of someone, or I'll see a post that someone makes, or interact with something, or I'll just have a thought of somebody and I'll be like, man, I really love this about them. I'm sure they already know. And I don't reach out, I don't text them, I don't call them. Anybody else do this thing? And we just assume that other people know all the things that are amazing about them. I don't think we do. How many of you are like me in that you are probably more self-critical than you are like self-aggrandizing, right? You tend to pick yourself apart. During this season, one of the greatest things has not necessarily been people reaching out and just asking me how I am, but reaching out and telling me they were thinking about me, or they like this about me, or they miss this about me, reaching out with some specific piece of encouragement, because that is the thing that I need. That is the thing that's lacking. The second thing I want to encourage you to do in terms of loving long distance or trying to love our neighbors in a time of quarantine is go below the surface. I think it is our gut impulse when somebody calls us, texts us, reaches out to us, and is like, how are you doing? Our gut impulse in our culture is to lie, right? Is to just be like, great, fine, whatever pat answer we have, fine, great, awesome, just living the dream, making it happen, doing the thing, whatever their little response is. But really. And I think just stopping and indicating that you really mean it gives people permission to open up on a different level. Some questions I think are helpful is like, how are you doing today? Right? I don't know about you, but like that changes from day to day during this experience. Some days I'm like, I'm doing great. Other days I'm like, please, somebody come pick up these children. I don't know what's going to happen. We need another ice cream delivery. But really, right? But really is usually my second question. I think the third thing which is helpful is to ask people the question of, what are you loving, right? What are you loving about this season? Again, sometimes we trend negative, right? Oh, isn't it so hard? But to actually, what's positive? What are you loving about this? To give people a category to actually begin looking for the things that they're really enjoying and appreciating about this season. To ask them, are you taking care of yourself? I think that's a very helpful question. In what ways are you or aren't you? That sometimes brings people to the real of what's actually going on in their day to day. And then I think the last question, when we're going below the surface is, what are you missing right now? What are you missing right now? It could be a thing, it could be an activity, it could be a resource. It could be like, I'm missing this sort of an experience, I'm missing this person, I am missing toilet paper, right? Like it could be a lot of things that we're missing. And sometimes it gives us information about how we can care for them, how we can help for them. But even just providing an opportunity for someone to vent and share their experience is a lot. I don't know if you've ever gotten off the phone with somebody and you just told them all of the junk that was going on in your life, and they didn't give you one piece of advice and you felt 100% better. Anybody? Because it was so cathartic just to like kind of purge all that stuff and say the highs and lows. So the third thing that I want to encourage us to do is follow up with details. Follow up with details. If you've ever had a conversation with somebody about what's actually going on in your life, what you love, what you hate, what's hard, what's easy, and that person doubles back a day later with a text asking you a specific question about that thing. How many of you, that is one of the most loving things? You're like, there's that thing in you're like, you were listening. You know what I mean? Like your your heart grows like 4 times, like the Grinch, you know what I mean? Like it just enlarges in that moment. You feel seen, you feel heard. Not only were they listening to you in the moment, but they thought about you later, right? And they cared enough to circle back. Or it could just be something that you remembered about the conversation or an inside joke that you had with that person. Those moments are so rich, just having someone recount a detail and following up with that. How's this going? You mentioned that. I know you said you were looking forward to that. How did it go? Man, after I got off the phone, I thought this the other day that I'm really so grateful for your friendship. And that sounds weird, but I just wanted to text you that. The fourth thing to be a good neighbor is to look for what you can share. Look for what you can share. Just during this season of like, oh, I have the ability to go get groceries for our neighbor who lives up the street, who doesn't, he's a senior and he's nervous about getting out. And like, that's something we can easily grab him some things when we're standing in the forever long Costco line, and we can deliver those to his house. And that's something that we can do. Even just our experiences sometimes are helpful, or what we're reading that's inspiring us, or ideas that we have for engaging with our families or working smarter during this season. Sometimes we think like we have to be in person to share, but like just sharing ideas and encouragement is a big, big thing. And the fifth thing, look to expand your circle. Jesus was always talking about your neighbor isn't just a handful of people that are your favorites. They're also the people that are on the outside of that circle that maybe aren't your favorites. And maybe it's not because you don't like something about them. Maybe it's just because you haven't gotten a chance to get to know them yet. Which neighbors, physical neighbors in my community, have I not yet met? Which people at church have I like not seen and not texted and not they haven't jumped on a Zoom call in a while, and I normally wave to them to actually think about and text and engage and connect with those people. Who can you pull into your circle that doesn't already exist inside of that circle? And I wonder what it would look like for you to do these things in your everyday life as we're moving forward during this season, to say like, hey, I am going to, when I think about people, I'm going to reach out, even if that's just with a text or a phone call. Like I'm going to go below the surface. Walter's trying to get in the call here. Again, he always wants to be a part of it until I include him, and then he doesn't want to do it. I was trying to expand my circle to include Walter, and he rejected me. And sometimes that's going to happen, guys. When we go below the surface with people, right? When we follow up with details, when we look for what we can share, when we expand our circle. And I wonder what it would look like if you were able to set aside moments of your day that the goal is now, right now, this moment is not about me. It's not about how I'm doing or how I'm feeling. It's about what is going on with the other people in my house, in my community, in my neighborhood, in my life. And what is incredible about that is sometimes when I am feeling really moody and introspective and I'm feeling down on myself about what's going on with me, when I do flip that switch and say, like, Adam, the next half hour has got to be about the other people in your life that are not you, and being considerate of them, and not just loving them the way that you would want to be loved, but loving them in the way they need to be loved. And I come out on the other side of that chunk of time feeling better myself, because that's the way in which we're designed, right? When we lean into the needs of other people, when we love other people well, we become more like Jesus. We become the kind of people that we want to be, and then we're able to love ourselves in a better way. Everything that you're needing from other people, they are also needing as well. And you have the opportunity to step up and love them in really, really practical ways. And that's what I want to encourage you with, is during this season to love your neighbors, and not just in your own heart and not just with a prayer, but in very practical ways, because I think it makes a world of difference.